C-BookReviews, not to be confused with C-SPAN. Turn the news off and tune into a book.
Slamming it, retractions. I feel the back of my skull is cracking. A broken bone is piercing my brain, and I just hammered it in.
This next book review is Fear Nothing by Lisa Gardner. Now, I must say, I was pretty intrigued by this book, finding it at a 99-cent store, and seeing that it was autographed. It has a theme I have liked lately, which is detective stories, and this is one of them. And also, well, yeah, it is written by a female, and I was trying to read more books written by female authors, and I gotta say, like, I took a peek at it and it looked intriguing, and unfortunately it didn't live up to my expectations. Now, I did give it a good try, and I read the whole thing, and it was ironic because this book is like very readable, but also when it comes to storycraft, very, well, shall I say, clumsily written. And I wanted to like it a lot, and I saw videos of the author, Lisa Gardner. She's really beautiful, and I respect that she puts out a lot of books, and but like, this was my first book of hers that I've read. Maybe others are better, but the way that characters were written was like, you know, they did things that were totally unbelievable. And like, for example, like there's a scene in this novel where guards are running because an alarm is going off, and they're just all running like a stampede in the wrong direction, while like one of the you know, the suspects is in a parking lot, and she's throwing out firecrackers, and like that was enough to distract the whole prison and help an escape. And I was like, wow, like this is like Dan Brown but worse. And I'm kind of a fan of Dan Brown, but I can't like read his books without like saying how much of this is unbelievable and how much of this is choppily written. And in some ways, Lisa Gardner, like, if you like Dan Brown, you'll love Lisa Gardner, because some of the stuff she does is, in this novel at least, maybe not others, is completely unbelievable. And you know, I finished it, and you know, it stuck in my mind, and she wrote vividly, and she had this theme, blood is the love, or something like that, which would be great in a vampire story. And if she had tweaked it to where the characters were more believable, then I would have really enjoyed the story. And it did have some kind of like mystery to it, which I liked, but at the end of the evening, I felt that like, wow, you know, if this story, like, you know, if it only had like, you know, just a lot less bad, like a lot more good elements to it. I'm trying to actually think what it's missing, because I regret to say it's a lot, like just, well, like more actual surprises. Like I didn't feel surprised, like there was mystery to it, but in the end, with a twist at the ending, I felt like, oh wow, so this lady actually wasn't really so much the killer, like, well, it's a spoiler, but, and then it turns out to be someone else, and I felt like I'd been kind of like, you know, information was kept from me, like for no reason. It's kind of like, you know, watching a movie, and halfway through the movie you think the killer is like a giant reptile, and it turns out to be a spaghetti monster. And you're like, oh, okay, well, I feel dumb now, you know. But this is an autographed copy, and I gotta give her, probably her and her editors, I don't know who did it, more of the nitty-gritty work, but it's a smooth read. Mad respect to this being like a really easy to read book, but when it comes to like enjoying every page, you know, it got real tedious. Kind of like how some of Dan Brown's stories are. I like his overall idea, and Lisa had some good ideas too, but it just doesn't do it for me. It's among one of the more tedious books I've ever read, where the story had me rolling my eyes the whole time. So I would not recommend this book, but if you're a fan of Lisa Gardner or you want to try her out, I'm not going to stop you. Me, I'm not going to go back to her books, but I think that she deserves a chance, and you know, she's a best-selling author. I got my hats off to her for making a smooth read. I just wish it did more for me.
2 hours of pushing from Bison, he 12-bedroom. I'm a man of means, by no means, king of the road.
This next novel I'm going to review is The Outsider by Stephen King. Did you notice I changed my glasses? It's not because I'm trying to look cool. My other ones got too smudged. Anyway, now I've been waiting for this book to come out for a long time. When I heard about it online, I was pretty stoked. I thought, here we go, Stephen King's going to do detective crime again, like his Mr. Mercedes book and Mr. Mercedes trilogy. And I was like overwhelmed. I'm like, when it comes out, I'm going to get it, you know. And I waited for the library to send it to me, not send it to me, to say my hold was up and that I can pick it up for a month. You know, I had it on hold at the library for a month, and I read some of the beginning, and then I was reading it at work, and then I'm like, you know, when I wasn't busy, and I'm like, well, you know, I have to return it soon. I gotta buy it, you know, and so now I gotta say, what's my overall? Well, let me describe the story first before I get to my overall opinion. And it is about a detective by the name of Ralph Anderson, who he's on a case, and a boy has been brutally murdered, like basically like sodomized by a tree branch, and he goes with his fellow police officers. He's a detective, and he's with Officer Tom Yates and Troy Ramage, and they go to a little league game and arrest this coach, and the coach's name is Terry Maitland, and the way that they arrest Terry is it's not really discreet. It's kind of like a public shaming, humiliation, if you will. And you know, now at that point the novel is like really nitty gritty. It's like it's kind of reminds me of Mr. Mercedes, which I think that was a general understanding, you know, when he released this novel. He was going to be doing the detective crime thing again, and he came fresh off the Mercedes, the Bill Hodges trilogy. So he might have knew his fans like me were expecting, you know, something more like Mr. Mercedes. And the beginning doesn't disappoint. It's, you know, written in a really matter-of-fact style. It's pretty dark, you know. There's some I don't know what you would say, like machismo or something. Like, basically these guys are like, they're men, they or women, you know, and they want to catch the killer, you know. Doesn't matter if you're a guy. It's like women are macho too, but it's just an expression, you know. So they're gonna like they're determined, and I've done this. I've been a security guard, so I know about, like, sometimes you get excited and you do the wrong thing and you're over vigilant or whatever. I mean, nowadays I'm like the opposite, but sometimes you do it wrong, and I suspect probably in actual officers they go through the same deal where, like, they know they made a mistake. So that's kind of an interesting part of the book. But then I find much of it toward the latter end, it kind of gets dragged out, and I found that a lot of the characters were flat, and I felt like a lot of these characters, like Ralph Anderson included, they needed some more like depth and like you know, some kind of like more to them, and I would get into it in detail, but I don't want to nitpick at it. I mean, there's little reason to. I mean, the overall is pretty good. You know, the prose, I'm going to read off a list of prose. It does have a character from my favorite series, the Bill Hodges trilogy, a character from Mr. Mercedes. So if you don't want to know who that character is, stop the video and read Mr. Mercedes. if you do want to know, it's Holly Gibney. She makes a return appearance in this book. I'm like, yes. And she's an investigator who, she kind of gets involved in the paranormal. This was a great mystery. I was kind of scratching my head trying to figure out, oh, what's going on. It's creepy. Yeah, it's kind of like gross. It's psychological. It gets into your mind. It makes you, like, after I read, like, got to toward the end of this book, I started looking around, like, stop trusting people. I'm like, well, this person's a real psycho or a weirdo, you know. But then I'm like, yo, you know, I just read a real disturbing book, so I'll just let it slide. There is some humor in it, and that's a good side, but also a con, because the humor made me wish there was more humor in the book. But I think with you know, with it becoming like kind of scarier and scarier, there was probably little room for more humor. And then anyway, again, my cons, I would say it was a bit on the nose, like everything was wrapped up in a tight little package. And I kind of had like a problem with that. And then, I mean, it's not like a big deal, like that's what people expect, you know. But at the same time, I'm like, well, why wasn't the, you know, the villain in the end kind of wrapped up more tightly too? Like, some of that has left a mystery hanging, and I felt kind of teased with it, you know. And this book kind of like teases you, and that's okay. But like when I read Revival, you know, that novel teased me, but I felt like to a purpose, and then it had a big payoff. I didn't really see like what was the deal, what was going on with the dark forces, you know, like you know, is this villain, has the villain gone away, or are they still lurking somewhere, like, and it's kind of cool that way too, but like I wanted just a little bit more explanation. And what else, any other problems? Yeah, so with that, you know, the villain at the end of the novel, I feel it's kind of a cop-out, you know, for this cop story. But like, I'm being hard on King because I love him as an author, and I don't want to be too biased. And another little flaw, not a big one, is that this book had too many characters. And then I wondered at the end, well, like, the character of the detective, Ralph's son, is never even like, you know, never even makes an appearance, says, hi daddy, I'm back, you know, or whatever. But like, I'm really chopping hairs here. Like, don't listen to what I say. This book is awesome, and Stephen King is a great writer still. He's a great writer, terrific writer. And like, yeah, you know, I mean, so there is a lot going on, but it's a solid read. It kept me turning the pages. And Stephen King does, you know, he at least gives, like when he writes kids, you know, he gives them lines. And like I was just reading the Lisa Gardner book, and I had a kid named Jack in it who like didn't even have one single line. Like, a toddler is going to say something like food, water, whatever, and like, I'm like, is this like, when I'm trying to picture the kid in that story, I'm like, is this kid a Cabbage Patch doll? You know, like, it just stares in the back seat in the baby, you know, chair, and I'm like, no. But King doesn't do that. He gives all of his people, like whether they're little people like kids or like adults, lines. And I would say this is like great if you like Mr. Mercedes. Read this. Don't expect it to be on the same level of explosiveness as Mr. Mercedes, but you will have like kind of a slow burn, kind of like detective, kind of like a, I would almost call it like a ghost story, but it's not really clearly explained, and I shouldn't spoil it for you. So good Sunday read, check it out. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed hearing my thoughts on popular novels. Take care, and if you get on the road, be very careful for those demonic drivers out there. Alright, bye.
Trailers for sale or rent, rooms to let 50 cents.
Ow! 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 I stubbed my toe.